No, you're not going to be bored. You can never be bored by the Alfred Russel Wallace story. So I make no apology for revisiting the man who so unjustly lives on in footnotes in textbooks. Discovery of Evolution by Natural Selection by Charles Lugubrious Bearded-Faced Darwin. Footnote. There was another guy. He was born in Wales. What is today Wales? It was actually England at the time, as that border fluctuates. The family was in Wales because they'd run out of money and it was the cheapest place to live. His father was one of the most feckless hapless individuals in the history of humankind. He was a trust fund kid. So, by the way, the myth that Wallace was working class is just that, a myth. He came from this thoroughly bourgeois background. Dad was a trust fund kid who had a facility for losing money hand over fist, and the two don't go together. So, as you know, Wallace was poor, not only as a child, but actually for most of his life. One thing he did inherit from his father was the inability to hang on to any money, and indeed to make appalling investments. This is where he was born. That's Mum. That's what it looks like now, as you see, actually rather gracious. This is the town of Usk. This is the River Usk flowing through it. This is the church in which he was baptized. And this is the baptismal register, which is interesting for one reason. As you all know, Alfred Russel Wallace defeats all known Google searches because of the peculiar spelling of Russell. It lacks the second L. And yet, there are two L's in the baptismal record, so I don't know what happened to that L. He's working with his older brother, William. William is a surveyor. So we're actually, to a certain extent, surfing the wave of the expansion of the railways in Great Britain, so to map out what you're doing. So young Alfred is wandering around the countryside, not being paid any money, and becomes interested in a very amateurish way, casually interested in botany. That changes in 1844 when he meets this guy, Henry Walter Bates, famous subsequently as the father, the discoverer of so-called Batesian mimicry. Bates is 2 years younger. He's also an autodidact. He's also a passionate naturalist. And this is a key moment, really a key moment in the story, because Bates converts Wallace to beetles. And that, talk about an epiphany. This is it, folks. Wallace is blown away. He's been looking at these boring little British plants. Now he's staggered by the diversity of beetledom, even within tens of miles of Leicester, where they're living in the Midlands of Britain. And Wallace believed this, I believe this, and this is a sort of sidebar. Beetles are a really key part of the Wallace story and, of course, of the Darwin story. As you know, we've described probably 1.8 million species, named 1.8 million species. 350,000 of those are beetles. It's stunning. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Beetles, beetles, beetles. They're going to come raining down out of the rainforest canopy, more new species as time goes on. And just to compare, look, birds. We think of birds as these sort of emblems of biological diversity. They're blue, they're green, they're red, they're diverse. No, it's pathetic. There's 10,000 species. And by the way, look, if you're trying to embrace biological diversity in Britain, good luck to you. It's pretty feeble, but a decent number of beetles. So that's the first thing. If you need beetles if you're actually going to engage with biological diversity. The second thing, and this is interesting, if you were interested in butterflies as an amateur naturalist, there wasn't anything to publish on because it's done. Not with beetles. Beetles is a big enough universe to allow amateurs to make the next step up to what you might call neo-professionalism, to actually contribute scientifically. Here is, Bates had already published a paper when Wallace met him. Beetles, an absolutely key part of the story. That's the empirical part of the story, okay? Then comes, and this is sort of strange, the theoretical part of the story. There was this book published anonymously. Anonymous because it's heretical. It's blasphemous. This is a book about evolution. It's actually the evolution of everything. This is Mr. Chambers, only revealed posthumously, by the way, his name. Mr. Chambers has laid out a scheme where everything evolves progressively, including life. Okay? This is important for all sorts of reasons. It's a lousy book, by the way. It's a lousy book. It's important because it drags this scurrilous, blasphemous idea out of the gutters and into the drawing rooms. Anyway, as you probably know, 1848 sees our boys. They arrive in the Amazon. They spend the first year or so working together. Then, remember, they're selling specimens, so it makes much more sense to split up. Bates goes south up the Solimoes. Wallace goes up the Rio Negro. They're collecting spectacular things, partly for scientific purposes, but obviously they've got to make a living. So you go for the high-profile specimens. Here's the cock of the rock, truly remarkable, ridiculous orange thing, and an umbrella bird, which has this bizarre crest plume. Contrast this, by the way, to Darwin. Darwin is the gentleman traveler. Honor. He's a guest on a naval surveying ship. When he arrives in town, or on the shore, I should say, sometimes there's a coach of four awaiting him from the local hacienda owner. Wallace is a backpacker. I mean, he's basically on his own in dugout canoes, schlepping this stuff around. And what a nightmare. He's collecting, for crying out loud. So he's just accumulating stuff, desperately trying to keep his collection together, occasionally sending them downriver. He's getting sick all the time. His brother comes out to help him. His brother, brother then is sent home. He hears Wallace is upriver. He hears that his brother is sick, got yellow fever in Belém. How does that turn out? How does it turn out? He doesn't hear for months, because of the inefficiencies of getting information upriver, that his brother has died. But 4 years, he's done enough. He's explored these remote regions, first European contact, that kind of scenario. Amazing collections, okay? All this stuff new to science. And even better, he's bringing a bunch of living stuff with him, about 30 animals, okay? Imagine he's got a spider monkey, he's got parrots. This is the vision. He's a nobody, remember. He's going to walk into a London scientific salon with a toucan on his arm. Ha! He's a somebody now, right? So, time to go home. 12th of July, 1852, he boards the Helen, bound for Britain, out of Belém. 3 weeks later, he's the only passenger. He's sharing the cabin, the captain's cabin. 3 weeks later, there's a knock on the cabin door. It's the captain. He says, "Mr. Wallace, I think you should come see. Ship's on fire." First big mistake. Oh, it turns out to be poorly stowed flammable cargo that's responsible, so they open the hold to check it out. Okay? Suddenly you're oxygenating this great pyre. This boat has been in the tropics for a while. It's dry wood. It's tinder. Okay? Abandoned ship. Wallace actually absolutely flays his hands sliding down a rope to get into the lifeboat. The lifeboat has been belly up on the deck, of course. That has absolutely dried out. There's two of them. They're clinker hulls. They've dried out. So, in fact, the lifeboats are sieves because the thing is just too parched. So they get into the first thing they have to do is keep scooping the water out so they don't sink. That's hard to do, painful to do if you've ripped your hands to shreds. There then follows what is surely the most poignant episode in the history of science. What are they going to do? There's two ship's boats. There's this burning pyre. They're going to stay there on the hope that the pyre will bring other shipping in the area in to rescue them. So they circle the burning wreck. And Wallace wrote subsequently that he watched as those animals that remember, he brought them across the continent. They were sprung from their cages by the flames. They go out to the last bit of the boat which is not on fire. That's the bowsprit. Confronted with an infinite ocean or a conflagration, they take the latter. So he watches. Not only is most of 4 years going up in flames, but also these precious animals which were both his pets and his passport to the scientific big time. Just in case, folks, you're not getting it, this is what it looked like. Okay? He's lost everything. But he is British, remember? So, and I love this. So 4 days, so he's now got 10 days in an open boat adrift in the middle of the Atlantic. I mean, this is forlorn, capital F. And yet he is able to write 4 days into this. During the night, I saw several meteors. In fact, could not be in a better position for observing them than lying on my back in a small boat in the middle of the Atlantic. That, ladies and gentlemen, is putting a positive spin on things. But he's got back. He's still a nobody. He doesn't have that stuff that was going to transform him from a nobody into a scientific somebody. So he has to do it all over again. This extraordinary set of journeys, 8 years through what he called the Malay Archipelago, i.e. from Singapore all the way into New Guinea. There's 40 specimens a day, thousands of new species, 14,000 miles. He discovered, and I'm going to talk about this later, he discovered Wallace's line, and it was during this voyage, of course, that he discovered evolution by natural selection. Okay? And he also wrote a fabulous account of these journeys, the Malay Archipelago, so much more readable than the Voyage of the Beagle.